Okay. So in 2024, my book was published by Routledge. This is the cover of the paperback edition, and I'm planning to talk to you to summarize pretty much everything in here. Um, I during my Peace Corps years, I had an interesting experience. Uh, a young boy in the school I was teaching at uh, performed a little act of sorcery against a visiting table tennis team. That act caused pandemonium and a hasty meeting of officials, the suspension of the boy, the cancellation of the results of the match and a replay, which we lost. It was a profound experience to a young Peace Corps volunteer, and it really was the instigation for 50 years of thinking about beliefs in the human manipulation of the supernatural. I I developed a course at the University of Buffalo on the anthropology of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft, and I offered it every year for more than 40 years, and it formed kind of the template for this book. Uh, I, the book proved to be very complex. I could not do it during a one-term sabbatical. I could never afford a full year sabbatical because I had kids in college. Um, but it became an ideal retirement project, especially when COVID set in and isolation was kind of enforced. And Routledge grabbed it up and it was published it was released the end of 2023. It has a 2024 um, publication date. The rationale for the book, another book on these widely studied topics, um, is justified, I say, for several reasons. As I got involved in the ethnological study of both phenomena over the years, I realized first that there is no standard definition of either of them, which makes ethnology very difficult. Even among anthropologists, there was not agreement about what these terms should mean: magic, sorcery, and witchcraft. And among the general public, there is a huge range of meaning of all three of those terms. So to try to standardize meaning and to justify such standardization was one uh, purpose. Another was that most writers, I can't say quite all, but nearly all writers, social scientists and lay writers, uh, use the terms without explanation, without definition, apparently assuming their readers know what they mean. And as an anthropologist, I've discovered fairly quickly that very rarely did the writers use the terms in the way their subjects used the terms. Um, that there rarely did they indicate an understanding of the belief systems that they themselves were referring to. And so that's another, to try to get at an emic um, meaning of these terms was another purpose of the book. But the main purpose is indicated in my subtitle. Over the years of doing ethnology, studying these phenomena and related beliefs across cultures, I came to the realization that certain components of them are absolutely universal. And when something is so like this is discovered to be universal, a logical suggestion is that there's something fundamentally human going on here. There's something beneath the level of shared culture. I identified six principles of what I'm calling um, magic. I should say that I spent a couple of pages on popular definitions and the various anthropological definitions of both of my title terms. And with reference to a lot of previous investigation, I've boiled down the components of magic to these six concepts in order and an intended order. The first is power, the same sort of power that permeates supernatural beliefs, the same sort of power that is conceptualized to be in supernatural beings. Um, it's also it's a transferable uh, essence. It's also a thingness. Everything has its own uh, um, essence, in some instances, an active power that is transferable by contact. The second concept is forces, which have been described by many previous writers, um, invisible energies that uh, are transferable across space, that are vested in things in nature and acting either alone or in concert with others, they are what make things happen. And magic is the human effort to manipulate these forces. I'll get back to it in a moment. The manipulation of the forces depends on the concept of a coherent, interconnected cosmos, that everything in the cosmos is potentially or actually interconnected, past, present, and future. Um, Not all peoples everywhere would use that kind of language to describe this belief, but the belief is, although it's rather vague, it seems to me universal. Um, and it is the basis for uh, concepts of divination that we'll get to a little bit later. Um, the act of magic requires the use of symbols, and I found a number of definitions of symbols. I like Raymond Firth's, which I cite in my book. Um, the symbol is not only represents or stands for something else, the symbol can stand in for the thing it represents. It can take on the qualities of the thing it represents. And if the thing the symbol represents has power, then the symbol itself becomes powerful. Words are symbols, and I cite Malinowski and his discussion of words in his writings on magic. And objects can be symbols as well. Symbols themselves are transferable. People can take symbols from one source, like a religious source, and use them in personal ways. And the Christian cross is the easiest example of that. The last two principles in the magic complex are Fraser's principles of similarity and contact, and he spends a lot of time. I recommend Fraser's writings on magic. They have really stood the test of time. Go to the 1911 edition of The Golden Bough, which by that time is in 12 volumes. And he has an entire volume on what he calls the magic art. Similarity um, is not only in form, shape, but also behavior or sound or texture or color. It's a similarity in a number of different possible aspects. And I cite a number of studies, clinical studies of imitation, showing that recognizing similarities in nature is really a higher order of cognition. Rudiments of it are found in some primates and possibly some other animals, but it's really at the foundation of human thinking. And the idea that things that resemble other things can have a causal connection to those other things is really an ancient idea. It goes back many centuries, and it's been formulated by a number of earlier scholars. Fraser's term for it is homeopathic, and the concept of homeopathy is older than Fraser by 2 or 3 centuries. And Fraser noted that the magical action between things or behaviors based on similarity is much more powerful if something from the thing that's being affected is incorporated into the act itself, the principle of contact. And I refer you to work by two psychologists, Paul Rozin, R-O-Z-I-N, of University of Pittsburgh, who's now retired, and his colleague, Carol Nemiroff, who's at one of the main MAINE universities. They studied principles of contagion, and they developed a number of experiments illustrating that, and they came to the conclusion that this too is a universal concept, that things that have been in contact with other things take on something of that thing that they were in contact with after they are separated. If that thing that was contacted has some particular property, either pleasant or unpleasant, that property is transferred through the principle of contact. Um, Fraser also pointed out that actual physical contact is not essential. Some kind of proximity, some kind of proximal association is all that's necessary. To have been in the same room, to have been in the same stadium uh, as some great event means that you were a part of that event and that some of it has rubbed off on you. And of course, one of the most popular examples of Fraser's principle is the image doll, the image magic performed by a doll, a representation of a person, and then doing something physical to the doll. Um, the transfer of that impulse to the actual target is made much more likely and much more intense if the doll has something that was worn by the person, something that came from that person's body. And these are, I am convinced, absolutely universal. Um, these six beliefs that I have identified as principles of magical thinking are found everywhere. They are fundamental um, principles of human cognition. They are the way people think, really. I'd like to move on. I'm not sure if I'm finished with this just yet. I have um, a chapter on introducing these, and then a chapter introducing the role of magic and magical principles in various ritual practices and concepts. Um, the act of magic, and I refer you again to Malinowski, um, who studied the magical ritual and wrote some insightful stuff about it in his 2 volumes of Choral Gardens. I want to use the word sorcery to refer to evil magic. Sorcery is, like magic and witchcraft, a loaded term with a wide range of meanings. One of its most common synonyms is classical witchcraft, which I'm going to get to right after this. Um, but most anthropologists, not all, have used sorcery as magic, as a learned practice involving the manipulation of symbols with an aim to influence the forces of nature to make things happen through some or others of these principles. Um, Sorcery also is used to refer to spirit invocation and command, and I cannot get around that. I have to acknowledge it. I want to emphasize in my discussion of magic that spirits are not involved. Um, Indeed, magical principles are used to either command and to invoke and command spirits, or to protect against unwanted spirits. But to command the spirit and send it off on some mission of good or evil is not um, in my definitions of magic because it gets us into all kinds of other concepts. It generates too many other questions. It is indeed in the realm of religion, of invoking a deity or a spiritual being of some sort. But the belief that, or the use of the word sorcery to include spirit invocation and command is so widespread that I'm not going to argue. I'm simply going to acknowledge that this is one of the meanings of sorcery, and we have to recognize it. But to work magic, spiritual assistance is not needed. Um, Words are involved. Verbal magic is of 2 sorts, blessing and curse. And these, again, are absolutely universal. People everywhere believe that words can make things happen. Simply by their speech, they are motivated by the intent of the speaker. They are carried on the breath of the speaker, and they go to their target. They can be blocked by a more powerful curse by the recipient, or a retraction by the cursor. Or the same is true for blessing. I'm putting them both together. Blessing is positive, and curse is negative, but they involve words. Um, they also can be conveyed through gesture, and I have some pages on the use of gesture for blessing or for curse, or indeed for other forms of magic and magical protection. The use of gesture, the recognition of gesture as a magical act is really ancient, and I've cited some early studies. Taboo is the avoidance of establishing a magical connection, which is also a universal concept. The idea that some magical connections can make negative, undesired things happen. The English word comes from Polynesian, Melanesian concept of taboo or kapu, um, which means having so much of that power, which in Melanesia and Polynesia is called mana, that the object or the activity is dangerous to people and to be avoided for that purpose. But in English, we have broadened the meaning to include any magical connection that might result in something undesirable. Divination also can use magical principles, but there are two forms of divination. One is the direct supplication of a deity, which gets us off into the realm of religion and out of my um, concepts of magic. But based on the principle, which again, I think this is probably universal, that everything that happens in the world is recorded, everything that is going to happen is recorded, and that people can tap into that record somehow. Words are essential, words in any language, of course, the idea of the coherent, interconnected universe. Um, and there are a variety of methods of divination using various materials and uh, drawing inferences from the way they fall, the way they mix or don't mix, or whatever. And the final act is magical protection, the idea of the amulet, using the power that is generated within a magical act to protect one uh, against potential evil from outside, or or to heal disease through the use of that power. I'm going to jump to witchcraft, which is much more complex, and I'm going to have to keep moving. Um, I've said that there is evidence that most of my principles are quite old. I haven't been able to find early prototypes of all of them, but I have of many. And the idea of the witch as a single being that embodies a huge range of evil concepts and abilities is really, really old. And in that little paragraph, I have made some references to some of the earliest evidence I've found for some of the characteristics uh, of the witch. These are the 14 that I identified. I started out with 12. I went to 13. I intentionally tried to get out of 13 because that generated a number of questions that I didn't want to have to deal with. Um, and I actually got up to 15 or 16, but reduced it to 14. It could be argued that some of them are arbitrary, but let's go in order. I have uh, 11 fundamental human fears. These are deep rooted. I gained a lot of insight through reference to evolutionary psychology, um, the recognition that behavior and what we could call tendencies uh, evolve just as does physical form, and the basis for ideas, including fears. And three, universal fantasies. The fantasies are indented simply for our purposes here of separating them. So, number one, witches are subversive. They spend a lot of their time plotting the undermining or overthrowing of human society, and this principle is found wherever there are witch beliefs. And I'll get to the case of societies that don't have witches shortly. Um, and as I was identifying these various traits, it occurred to me that these, and that I'm talking about over a period of years now, that these constitute a prototype conspiracy theory that and I'm so bold now as to state that the witchcraft demonology, this totality, this total narrative of what the witch does, is the prototype human conspiracy theory. Many of these elements you will easily see, and I'll summarize at the end, are evident in conspiracy theories today. They are deeply rooted in the human psyche, and it can be argued that they may have evolved uh, with human evolution. I don't want to go there today. The arguments can get convoluted. Anyway, social subversion. So witches are the original conspirators against orderly, uh, um, um, peaceful, domestic human society. Witches are most active at night, and the fear of night is a human characteristic, and it is indeed have. I'm sorry. One more thing about social subversion. There's some clinical evidence that the idea of a conspiracy is rooted in our neurobiology. The suspicion of strangers, the fear of a universal other with a capital O, the startle reaction in infants and children. There have been several experiments that have demonstrated that children who are shown pictures of their parents or of people who look like their parents respond benignly. But when they are shown pictures of people markedly different from their parents, they startle. The classic startle reaction, which is preliminary to the classic fight or flight reaction, is evident. And I argue that that lies at the basis for the human propensity to imagine dangerous others, outside threats to society. And such threats are most active at night, along with a whole class of um, evil um, beings, which are active at night. Witches can do their dirty work during the day, but they are most active at night. Now, keep in mind that the word witch in English refers not only to the human person who carries the power, but to the power itself. And in most cultures, the power leaves the body in some form or other, uh, and um, and it flies out. It flies out at night. In some other instances, or even in the same cultures, the whole body may fly along with the power. But mostly the witch has the ability to transform itself, number three, into some other form or to become invisible and to fly out at night to join other witches and to do their dirty work collectively. This idea of transformation, of the ability of beings, animals as well as people, to transform themselves is absolutely universal. There is no exception to this. It is found in children's stories, folk tales across the world, and really throughout history. Similarly, number four, flying. Flying is the stuff of dreams universally, the stuff of human fantasy universally, and it's found in folklore of all cultures. And fifth, my third universal human fantasy is the idea of a personal relationship with an animal. And the idea that we can commute with a particular animal, a favorite pet, a dog or a cat, or in many other cultures, a wolf or a bat or an owl, um, that we share a particular communication with that other creature which cannot be shared with any other. This is also the stuff of folklore, folk tales, children's stories universally, and that's found as a basic attribute of witches. The word familiar used as a noun, the Middle English word, the taking the adjective as a noun, um, is from Middle English, I think. The witch's familiar is usually an animal. In English and New England folk witchcraft beliefs, it can be a little spirit, which is called an imp, IMP, which is small enough that the witch can carry it in his or her pocket. But mostly it's an animal. Um, the animal has logical witch familiar characteristics. Um, it may be cunning, it may be nocturnal, it may fly, it may be a carnivore, it may be treacherous, a number of attributes in different cultures. But in much of European and English folklore, witch lore, the familiar was a domestic animal, a farm animal, a chicken even, or a rooster, or a goat, or a dog. Um, the goat was a popular witch's familiar, being a symbol of Satan, and in Christian concepts of witchcraft, Satan appears frequently as a goat. Anyway, I got to move on. Um, Attribute number six, the Sabbath, the word taken from Hebrew, because the first group of people to be collectively charged with witchcraft in Europe were Jews. And their word for their holy day is Shabbat, and that word came into English to designate the periodic gathering of the community's witches, which happens in on a known periodicity at a usually at a known place, always at night, at a place where people don't go at night, often a place associated with death, commonly a cemetery or an execution ground. The witches of the community meet periodically, weekly or monthly or whatever the periodicity is in any given culture, and there they plot um, their plans against human society. They bring their human victims. They do all kinds of terrible things at the Sabbath, including number seven, um, concoct the terrible diseases that they are going to spread around the countryside when they fly. European depictions of the Sabbath, a very popular um, theme in European depictions of witchcraft beliefs, uh, most commonly show the cauldron, this huge kettle, always at the center of the picture, steaming with noxious smoke. This is how the witches brew up their next horrible disease. Usually diseases of poorly understood etiology, um, like in the late Middle Ages, the plague, bubonic plague, and in modern times, the 1980s and 1990s, HIV/AIDS. AIDS workers in Africa were instructed to emphasize to people that AIDS is not caused by witchcraft, because that would be the logical conclusion. And results in many instances were and are today witch hunts, mobs of people charging individuals with supernatural abilities to spread disease. Central to all witchcraft beliefs is the abduction of children. Witches steal children everywhere. There is a universal belief um, that, well, nearly universal, that children are victims but not agents of witchcraft. The witchcraft power almost invariably develops in adults. Children may have the potential for it, but it develops in adulthood. But children are the preferred victim. But witches will capture any human beings and carry them to the Sabbath um, with, and there, number nine, another fundamentally human characteristic is sexuality. I have argued in my book and in a number of other sources that sexuality is central to human identity everywhere in the world. Aberrant sexuality gets people into trouble everywhere in the world. And wherever there is aberrant sexuality of any sort, it can be blamed on witches. That's what they do. They perform illicit sex at the Sabbath with each other. Whatever sexual acts are forbidden or considered aberrant in human society will be performed by witches at the Sabbath, especially incest, which, as we know, is universal. And witches uh, have sexual relations with each other, with children, with adults, with siblings at the Sabbath. But they also interfere with human sexual activities. In the early modern Europe, witches were responsible for sending demons called incubi or succubi. The incubus attacks the female, and the succubus attacks the male sleeper and has sexual relations with them in their sleep. Um, and human sexual difficulties, ED or impotence of any sort, or infertility among women are frequent um, acts of witches. The next few are perhaps a little more arbitrary. At the Sabbath, the witches engage in ritual murder of their human victims. Now, ritual murder is a separate fear widespread in the world, and has charged a number of individuals. It's a common charge, as we'll see in a few minutes. Um, but it doesn't mean sacrifice. It doesn't mean an offering to a deity. Rather, this ritual means a repetitive behavior that is somehow stylized and standardized. And uh, the early modern prototypes of Satanism have the human victim being stabbed with knives, and the blood being collected in certain ways, and the body parts being distributed and cannibalized and so forth, all as part of a horrible ritual. And that's the sort of ritual that witches are accused of in various demonologies. The ritual use of blood and body parts is a fear found universally, especially in urban areas. It's not so much found in rural areas, and and very rare, if at all, among nomadic pastoral peoples. We'll get back to that in a moment. Witchcraft is common among settled peoples in the world and throughout history, but not only uncommon, but perhaps totally lacking in nomadic and hunter-gatherers and so forth. Um, but numbers 12 and 13, I had them together at one point. I separated them because conceptually, really, they are different. Cannibalism is universally feared throughout the world. Um, it's universally abhorrent. It's disgusting. It's viscerally repugnant to peoples everywhere. And it forms a basis for a common epithet that people use against other peoples. It was a common during the early days of exploration and the colonial era when it was simply assumed that the uncivilized savages of the world were cannibals. Um, and I separate vampirism, uh, by itself because there are some beings that are solely vampires, which have a number of the attributes of the witch, the classic Dracula story and variants on that. But just as cannibalism can be a defining feature of witches, especially in Africa, so can vampirism. In my first research in Adamawa, northeastern Nigeria, among a kingdom known as Bachama, I heard English-speaking Bachama people refer to the cannibals. And it took me a while I was uh, working with the language to learn that that was the most appropriate English word they had for witches, because witches eat people. And they attack people over time. They fly in through your bedroom window, or even through the keyhole of your door, and sit on you and suck out your life force. And um, tuberculosis and other long wasting diseases are caused by that long process of witches eating people. But the eating doesn't necessarily have to be um, uh, consumption as of food, but consumption of will, consumption of energy, consumption even of one's professional abilities. Any kind of consumption can be called in English eating, and witches do all of that. And witches drink human blood in the very same way that the vampires of Eastern Europe were believed to. And you might be surprised to know that vampirism, as a separate category of supernatural um, activity, lasted in New England far, far longer than witchcraft. Witchcraft ended in New England in the 17th century, but vampirism continued into the end of the um, where am I? The end of the 19th century into the late 1800s. The last case of alleged vampiric activity took place in Rhode Island in 1894 or something like that. And so I have separated it from cannibalism as a separate attribute of the witch. And finally, the fear of death has occupied scholars and theologians' concerns probably forever. Witches are associated with death, not only because witches kill. In parts of Oceania, the single cause of death is witchcraft. Malinowski noted that. I refer you to some writings by Michelle Stephan or Stephen, how does she pronounce it, where witches are blamed for all deaths in certain oceanic societies. But also, as I pointed out, witches meet in a cemetery or an execution ground. Witches are necrophiliacs. They uh, they dig up corpses. They have sex with corpses. They are what's the word? Necrophages is the word. They eat the corpses of dead people, um, and they in many cultures, there are explanations for witches. There are myths that explain why there should be witches. And frequently, those stories have something like a Faustian element. The original people um, uh, made some pact with the god of death. They became his agents on earth in return for something, riches, luxury, longer lives, or maybe eternal life, a variety of rewards. uh, and that's a very widespread explanation for death. So my arguments that magic and witchcraft are, as I have defined them here, are rooted in fundamental human ways of thinking and fundamental human fears and fantasies, add another dimension to the wide-ranging theories for both. Most theories of magic and witchcraft are functionalist theories, de deriving from functions that these beliefs seem to serve. I argue that the principal contribution of my book is to have added to these theories, uh, going deeper than function. The argument that they are inherent, that they emerge in times of social stress, social anxiety, is strengthened by modern events. I was active as a consultant during the 1980s and 1990s when fears of satanic cults spread around the US and indeed throughout the world. Not a single shred of evidence was found that any such cults really existed. But among the allegations of the behaviors of these cults were many that I'm sure you've already recognized that are inherent in the witchcraft demonology. And I came to the conclusion that any seclusive, exclusive, seclusive organization that that hides itself, that somehow separates itself from the rest of humanity, the rest of the community, may likely be subject to these kinds of suspicions. And this was clear in the history of Freemasonry. Masons were charged with abducting children and conducting all kinds of horrible rituals and killing the children and eating their flesh and drinking their blood, having sexual orgies. Um, uh, Nuns in convents, monks in monasteries. Um, when Haiti was shut off from the rest of the world by Louis XIV under the infamous Code Noir for an entire century, up till 1804, um, such allegations developed about voodoo, about human sacrifice in Haiti, about child sacrifice, etc. Look at the history of the Bohemian Grove, that political retreat area in near San Francisco, where lots of world decisions have been made. From the 1950s and 60s, world leaders met there with from the time of the atomic bomb um, up through the Vietnam War and later. Allegations about what went on there mirrored some of these. And in modern times, this mythical organization called QAnon are engaged in child sexual trafficking and cannibalism. Remember Pizzagate, um, uh, when a child sex trafficking ring was allegedly operating in the basement of a pizza parlor in Washington, and some fellow went in there with an AR-15 to save the children. And that Salvadoran gang, which is not imaginary. This gang really does exist, and it's been the subject of an anthropological study and ethnography by Daniel Ward. It's about 10 years old now, maybe 2014, 2015, somewhere in there, called MS-13. They actually did revere uh, uh, a, a, a imagined complex of satanic um, ritual uh, through which they apparently believed they could gain power, and other cases. So I'm going to end there and take questions. I don't, we are at the end of our first hour. I don't know how much time Tim wants us to have. Um, what's normal? Is an hour or an hour and a half normal?
Yeah, well, it just goes along for at least, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, depending on the number of questions. Could
I've got to end by five, before five, if
Sure.
possible.
Yeah, no problem. We'll be done before then.
All
Phil,
right.
could you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, sure. Let me see. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I've put my email address and my cell phone number. If any of you would like to purchase my book, I will send you a link and a code for a 20% discount. That's the best I can offer. So take down my email address here. Shall I erase it now? Or my cell phone number? Okay.
Okay.
So I'll stop sharing. And here we are. Thank you all for your attention.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Phil. Very, very interesting. Marjorie, you have your hand up. Did you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Sure. I'm not fully coherent here, but I think I can begin by saying that I've got some intriguing questions about the tension between universals and more specific European and other cultural roots. And you may have opened up possible route towards answering that when you started to talk about the differences among settled peoples and less frequent some of
Oh my
this.
God, you're reminding me. I
Uh,
totally left out. I've argued that these are universal. Can I have just a minute, Marjorie, and I'll get back to
sure,
you? Um,
sure.
I have a whole section that I've left out. Um, in recent decades, there have been studies of so-called dark shamans. And it's been revealed that shamans are widespread believed to do many of the same things that witches do. They can transform themselves. Sidney Greenfield is nodding his head. Um, he knows some of the authors that I'm thinking of. Um, Robin, what's his name? Anyway, let me carry on. Shamans do some of the same things that witches do. There's an interesting article recently called "Vampiristic Shamans," published in Anthropology of Consciousness, and the concept of the dark shaman. So there's further evidence to support my argument that some of these attributes are universal, found in areas that don't have witches. Shamans are the dominant religious agency in pastoral and other nomadic societies. and forms of shamanism predominate among hunters and gatherers. But otherwise, the same fears are found in other evil beings, usually evil nocturnal beings. The fears that there are dangerous creatures out there waiting to pounce on our children, etc., etc. So thank you for reminding me. I totally forgot
But
to.
I'm gonna try to go a completely different direction, if I may.
Okay, okay.
It's kind of important. What I'm trying to say is because I've been focused on Siberian shamans, there are some places where I think they're real contrasts. And the reason behind this may have to do with the settled nomadic that you already mentioned, but there are some other aspects. One of the most dominant is that in many of the Siberian groups that I have looked at pretty closely and worked with, including in the field, there is nothing like a Sabbath. In other words, shamans are very much loners in a lot of these contexts in which they really are more in competition with each other and therefore really not likely to have anything remotely resembling a Sabbath. That would be
That's
an
right.
extraordinarily unusual situation. So that's one of the strands that I wanted to ask you about. But the other, I mean, because you relied a lot on the issue of shamans getting more together. Um, but the Sabbath, but if shamans are like witches. But on the other hand, there's another way into some of these questions that also has to do with the tension, a bigger tension of when you're asking yourself to understand the emic, the understanding of how groups are thinking themselves about these issues. It's very hard to keep spirits out in a situation like that. And so I was wondering how you were dealing with that. I was also thinking of one of my learning curve moments where I was
And can you
told
stop for a minute? You now
words each
let
sheet.
me let me address the first question first. I've just opened my um, Routledge insisted that I have a separate bibliography for every chapter. So I'm looking at the bibliography for my final chapter. Uh, um, Neil Whitehead, 2002, Dark Shamans. Okay, that's where the term was first originated. And Whitehead and Robin Wright, 2004, in Darkness and in Secrecy, the Anthropology of Assault Sorcery. Um, in both instances, and the other one that I'm blanking on, the one from Siberia, there are discussions of how shamans do meet with others in opposition to yet other shamans. As you say, they are in competition with each other, and they can ally themselves apparently. I don't want to argue this too hard because not all of these attributes can be so successfully applied. Will you please state your second question, the second part of your question, restate it? You're muted.
When you're talking about looking at things from insider points of view, it's a very great tension to do that and also to be claiming universals. And therefore, one of the places where I seem to be alerted to this doesn't sound very emic in terms of the groups that I've worked with, is that there's a phrase called words have ichi, they have spirit. And it's not meant necessarily metaphorically. Spirits are crucial to the whole process. And I know you've kind of um, placed them outside of your argument, but I'm having a little trouble looking at it as a emic matter to place spirits outside of this discussion.
In the discussion of magic. Okay. Um, my book talks about a lot of variations in each of these 14 attributes of the witch and 6 principles of magic. There are a tremendous range of variations. And my statements about universality can be easily qualified. And there are going to be exceptions. Um, the question of the involvement of spirits is one that I wrestled with, as I indicated in my introduction. I can only acknowledge your recognition of exceptions. What was your third point, Marjorie?
That's enough for now. I think we should let other
Okay.
people.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Sandy, do you have something? You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just published a book on behavior, belief in health, social determinants of religion for health. And I want one of the largest chapter was the history of my father's family in New England. And I realized in doing that history that I'm descended from two of the Salem witches.
Oh,
Rebecca
so am
Nurse
I.
and you are really? We're
Yeah.
cousins? Which one?
Not descended by not direct descent. Nims. Never mind. Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So, and Marytown Eastie. And so I've looked into a lot of what they believed. And I have to say, some of my cousins, distant cousins, are evangelical missionaries, right? And I brought the book to them about 2 weeks ago. I went to Boston, brought the book to them, and I said, "Oh yeah, we're descended from Marytown Eastie, who was a witch who was hung at Salem in 1692." And they were afraid of the book. They didn't want to touch the book. These are modern people, but I was interested in this. They really believed that these ladies were witches, and they didn't believe that they were. Marytown Eastie left a, a document that she begged for the leniency to the other people she was jailed with. And she said she wasn't a witch. She believed in witchcraft, but she said she and her fellow prisoners in the jail
Yeah,
that
and
summer.
the testimony of Mary Eastie is one of those that is really
Yeah,
verbatim recorded.
yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that. I remember that testimony. Um,
And they didn't focus much on sexuality, I think, because the Puritans were, that was like a big no-no for them, but they did focus on writing. One of the things they asked in the Salem witch trials is, have you written in the devil's book?
yes.
So writing for them, because they were Puritans, they were intensely trying to learn from the English translation of the New Testament. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you for that. And this belief is widespread today. Um, I spend a little time on writing in my discussion of speech as a magical vehicle. Um, uh, I have I have a new theory of literacy, which I developed during my Peace Corps years in Nigeria, before I was an anthropologist, even about the reverence that people ascribe to the written word. It's a separate document, separate discussion, but it's directly relevant to this. Um, the written word embodies and makes permanent an idea, and writing about witchcraft embodies the sense of witchcraft. Look at Muslims' attitude toward the Quran today.
Yeah,
The Quran
yeah,
is different from the Bible. The Quran is the actual words of God, and the
yeah.
words of God contain power, and the written versions of those words contains power. So the Quran itself is a powerful object. I'm sorry, I'm going to go far
No,
astray here.
it's absolutely, I just want to say the focus that I have on that chapter is literacy, because I'm
Yeah,
a medical anthropologist and public health person. So I was looking at what caused their deaths and how long did they live and what was their health all through, like from my father all the way up to 1540, I think. all the ancestors that I could find of his
Maybe
mother's
you
family
could
and
you send
father's
me
family.
could you send me an email when we're finished here, and I'd like to follow up on your Salem connection.
Sure, sure,
Okay, yeah,
absolutely.
please. I see, Tim, you have your hand up. Who else?
Yeah, my question has to do with, I've had, when I did my dissertation research in Peru, I ran into some supernatural experiences with regard to witches and strange beings that I haven't encountered here, but I certainly had no reason to discount their existence there. And and then I also spent a few months in Togo, and I ran into some individuals who, of course, this is, there were a lot of voodoo markets available where you could buy, I'm sure you've seen them in Nigeria, buy spiritually important items.
The boy who performed sorcery at my school had gone to one of those the juju section of
Yeah,
the
that's,
popular market and bought his materials there. Yes, every large market in West Africa has a separate section where you can buy magical materials. It's separate from food. It's separate from clothing. You want to
yeah.
keep that kind of power away from everything else.
Yeah, so I mean he told me I remember a particular person who told me about his experiences with eating a whole dog and it coming out of him as a whole dog. And this ex was connected with his ability to demonstrate that that he was a prince, his royal connections. But really the question I have is that this experiences that I had in Togo, which obviously is fairly widespread in West Africa, um, and in the experiences I had in Peru were things that I had no trouble believing and experiencing, but when you explain this to students in class, here in the US, uh, with the exception of Sandy's relatives or friends, most people poo-poo these ideas, say, no, this is just the realm of superstition, not real. And they don't necessarily make the connection with QAnon, Pizzagate, the things that you mentioned. So why is there this kind of disconnect between an understanding of this supernatural, spiritual, witch-filled world that is present in places that many of us have traveled to, um, and is less prevalent here in the US, except as a historical feature?
I would like to say, Tim, that a major reason is that no one prior to me has brought all of this stuff together.
Hmm.
Um, it has to do with education, I think. Um, a lot of these beliefs, which we may dismiss as superstition, are based in some of the very same principles of human thinking.
Hmm.
And you asked why, and why are they compartmentalized or why are they separate? I spend a little bit of time on superstition, and most of my discussion of most superstitions are in fact examples of magical thinking that I have described here. There are some superstitions that involve spirits, spiritual activity, which are exceptions.
Well,
Um,
I do think that, I don't want to discount the fact that there is magical thinking in Catholicism, Protestantism and so
yes, and
forth.
the distinction between magic and religion is an artificial one, and I make a point of that too. They overlap tremendously. There's an awful lot of magical thinking in religious ritual.
Mhm.
And I talked about how concepts of power can be taken from religious sources and used magically. I see that Rick Feinberg has his hand up. Rick, it's good to see you without your neck brace. I hope you're recovering well.
Yes, I seem to be, and thank you for that. Um, and I just wanted to say that you have raised a lot of points that would be great to talk about at length. I'll just mention one, and that is that when you start talking about universals, especially with a group of anthropologists, you really get into a lot of potential nitpicking issues, and I will pick one nit for you.
Yeah, Marjorie identified some of them already. Yeah.
Yes. Well, your comment that cannibalism is universally frowned upon, it's regarded as disgusting and just given over to witches or other evil characters. Um, that is not necessarily true. And one very prominent exception is the foray of the New Guinea highlands, where when a
Mhm.
relative died, until Christianity became
Yeah,
predominant.
and I discussed the exceptions, especially
Okay.
the ritual exceptions, um, including the Eucharist.
Hmm.
And you know, Catholic missionaries had a difficult time in the
Yeah.
early years. Um, and I acknowledge the long debate stimulated by what was his name? You know, the man-eating myth. Come on,
Oh,
Guy to check.
no, no. I got to
William
check.
Aaron, Bill Aarons,
Bill Ayers, I think.
who
Aaron,
started that whole thing way back in 1980 or so. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and there are alleged examples, but
Mhm.
I'm sorry, exceptions. But the fundamental question that Aarons and I will ask is, where is the evidence? Because in most instances, these are deep, firm, lasting beliefs. But the actual evidence is scarce or non-existent. What was her name? Conklin and in South America, who
Beth
Yeah,
Conklin.
but in,
Beth, yes, and I think that question was asked of her. The beliefs in cannibalism, especially cannibalism of enemies to gain their strength or to somehow dishonor them or um, um, to gain attributes, etc., are so deeply rooted that they are believe that they are absolutely true. You know, I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
yeah, but the foray are a really good counterexample. They played a key role in the Nobel Prize that was awarded to Carlton Gajdacek in
Right, right,
1985.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were the practice of cannibalizing deceased relatives was from his firsthand experience working with the foray, critical to
Mhm.
the transmission of Kuru, which was the first identified prion disease that
Yeah,
affected human beings.
yeah, mad cow disease.
Right.
Yes, I acknowledge that, and I agree with you, Rick. And I have myself have been taken to task for making such statements by people who assert firmly that not only does cannibalism exist in some cultures, it was preferred, and certain of course children are the most popular victim because they are tender and fresh and so on and so on. Some dynasties of China the Chinese rulers um, uh, feasted on human flesh. What are we going to do with all of this? The debate will go on and on. Let
Yeah,
me just say that it is it is it is widely disgusting
yeah,
and abhorred and the stuff of nightmares.
and that is fair. I think the moral is just to be really cautious when you say that anything is universal.
I have a couple of pages introducing how I use the concept of universals, and I try to qualify my sweeping statements
Sounds
before I make them.
Let's
Thank you
let's
for
get
that.
Alice Kehoe.
Well, I was just briefly going to say I taught thousands of Catholic students at the Jesuit university I taught in. And I kind of carefully tried to get them to understand that, what they had heard about primitive peoples, X, Y, and Z wasn't true and all that. So I did briefly talk about the idea of cannibalism and emphasize that there are societies in which eating a certain part of someone, nearly always a valiant enemy you have slaughtered, uh, is done ritually. It's not food, and it is part of very general rituals in which a very token item might be metaphorically said to be part of the power of someone. Well, of course, I was speaking very carefully, but of the thousands of students, one young man walked up and said, "So when we take the communion wafer and the wine, we are cannibals." And I said, "I didn't say that." And he quickly told me how his parents were leaving the Catholic Church because of the things that came up that they found abhorrent. But above all, the trigger was that his younger sister was not allowed to serve at the altar as he had been. And that apparently triggered a whole wide discussion in this family. But I mean, to me, as a Jew, it's absolutely, it, I would really say incredible that millions and millions of people sit there and say, "I am consuming the blood and the body of Jesus Christ." What?
Right, right,
Yeah.
right, right. Thank you, Alice.
Anybody else?
Anything, any others? So in his introduction and in the introductory comments, which Tim put online, I mentioned my work with the stone images of SCA. If you ever find yourself without a speaker on any a month of your monthly chats, I have a prepared talk about this phenomenon that I have called the Africa's greatest mystery. I'm sure you would find it interesting if you want to keep that possibility in mind. I can send Tim an abstract of it, just as a thought.
Okay, thanks,
Please
Phil.
do.
Thank you. So we've got time for was there one last question someone might have? Sid, did you want to have something to say? No?
No,
Okay.
no, I'll pass this time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Phil. I'm really, really, really very grateful for you taking the time to talk about this. This is fascinating. There's a whole bunch of things that you've raised that have stuck
My,
in my head now that's going to be a head worm for a long time to come that I've got to, think about all over again. Some of the things that and reevaluate, I mean, ritual endocannibalism in, at each and every mass, and stuff like that is always, it's refreshing to remember all of this stuff and how we are all interconnected. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's come to my mind is thinking about the interconnectedness of all of us, even though there's a tendency for us to compartmentalize that we're like this and they're different, and they have superstitions and we have accurate beliefs and things like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
kind of
When Murray Leaf gave his talk a couple of weeks ago, he cited somebody who talked about people think alike, people everywhere think alike, and Alison Irving Child in a book that I cite said that James George Fraser was looking at, quote, the fundamentals of human thought, and you're absolutely right. And let me repeat that I'll be glad to respond to anybody and send you a link to the book. Publishers, you might know, especially since COVID, have cut way back on their marketing, and they have urged their authors to do more of it themselves.
Yeah.
Um, really, it's gotten kind of a burden. Um, we have to buy and send copies of our books to journals if we want them reviewed. Um, so if any of you can help me promote the book, please do.
Okay, thanks a lot, Phil. Well, I'm gonna thank you very much. Little applause, and we really do appreciate it. And next month we're going to be at the AAA meetings. Rick has sent out all of the information about it. In December, Sandy Lane, who's here with us, is going to talk about her experiences in the of domestic field work and working with community participation and students as as part of her the arc of her career, so to speak. And I'll be getting that information out to you. It'll be on December 11th. So thank you very much, Phil. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.